Born to Build podcast.
Welcome to Born to Build, conversations with the builders, founders, and pioneers driving change from the ground up, giving you the tools to build and grow your business. My name is Sam, and today I'm joined by Meg Faure, an occupational therapist and founder of ParentSense. We took decades of hands-on experience with families and turned it into a tech platform supporting parents at scale. Meg, it's so great to have you today. Great chatting with you. Welcome.
It's great to be here, Sam. Thank you for inviting me.
Meg, before ParentSense was an app, you were deeply embedded in infant care and occupational therapy. In fact, I remember probably, must be about 12 years ago. I think I remember we were one of your clients with our firstborn. But what were you seeing on the ground that made you think this needs to exist at scale?
Yeah, so as an OT, I ran a clinical practice that dealt with little ones who were having some issues navigating sleep or feeding or development. So a lot of the little ones had something going on. I mean, your little one, I don't remember, but probably was typically developing, but there was a little bit of a navigation issue. You were trying to work something out. And I realized that when I was helping parents with children with difficulties, it actually would work really well for children who didn't have major difficulties and whose parents could just be kind of preventatively helping to set up good sleep, good feeding, good development. And so I started to work more with the typically developing child, almost in a preventative health manner. And I think that was my first major pivot in my life, in that I moved from focusing on the, kind of on dysfunction to focusing on preventative health and using exactly the same principles. So I didn't change anything in my principles. I just shifted my focus. And at that time, I knew that the only way to reach typically developing children at scale was to do something like write a book. And so that was the first kind of development of my practice, was to take myself from clinical work into a book, which later on then became my various companies and actually also my seminars, which ran from 2005 through to about 2019. So I always knew I wanted to touch the lives of typically developing children with preventative health, and I wanted to do it at scale.
Mm. So yeah, you mentioned your books and you built a respected practice. What made you step into tech with an app and ParentSense?
Yeah, so my very first company actually was not specifically a tech company. My first company was a baby product company called BabySense, which was the name of the first book as well. And BabySense was kind of providing solutions for basically infant sleep. It was sleeping bags and carriers and doo-doo blankies and, all type of what we call soft goods, soft products. And at the time, I was very involved in obviously stock. And anyone who is listening to this who's been involved in stock, as building a stock business, knows that success breeds some very extreme debt situations. I mean, the more your product is listed, the more demand you have, the more you've got to produce. And you've always got to have this pipeline of stock and, of course, this massive, eventually, debt. And so, which is amazing, because as long as you're doing your numbers right, you're still profitable. But the point is, you've got to have a lot of working capital. And I never really wanted to, when I sold that business, which was in 2014, I never really wanted to get back into a stock business. It was kind of just, I didn't want to do it again. And still to this day, I would never get involved in a stock business. But I also knew I wanted to have impact. And the easiest way to have impact at scale is, of course, through technology, because it's so ubiquitous. It sits in our hands. And so if you want to touch parents' lives and babies' lives, the best way to do it is through tech. And so I took everything that I'd built, from the books, the knowledge, the clinical practice, and even actually solutions like the BabySense products, and I baked it into a tech product, into an app, in order to achieve scale.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love how you've got such a unique mix as well of skills, like very entrepreneurial, but you've got obviously your occupational therapist background as well. I don't think there are many people in the world that have that very unique combination of skill sets, both very, take a lot of I think a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. So yeah, it's amazing that what you're building. But take us back to the first version of ParentSense. What did that look like? And maybe even, what did you get wrong in those first early iterations as you're building it out? take us back to those early days.
Yeah. So I had started to build it in 2019. I came up with the idea, and I was really thinking about let's take the product into an app. And it actually came because I visited an influencer, and I took her my Weaning Sense book to wish her well on having had her baby. And she looked at me and she said, "Thanks very much. I probably won't read it." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "It's got to be in an app. It's the only way I'll read it. It's got to be in an app." And so at that point, I then realized, okay, it is time to build this into an app. And so that's what we did. We started to build the app in early 2020. What is very interesting, and for those who are in tech, these numbers will be crazy. We basically started coding on the 1st of December, 2019, and we went to market with a fully functional app with a full CMS and 2 native apps written in Swift and Kotlin, which are the iOS and Android languages. And we did that on the 27th of April. So that's kind of like a 4.5-month period from start to finish. Now, that is crazy. Now, the only reason we could build in that period of time was I had interviewed 14 different companies. I'd narrowed it down to 3 different dev houses. And at the end, I was kind of weighing up between these 3 dev houses. And the final question in the last meeting that I gave to each of them is, do you have children? Which is a crazy question, because why do you need children to be able to code? But the one guy said to me, he said, "My wife's pregnant." And I gave him the job. And the reason I gave him the job is that I knew it was personal. I knew that he was going to build this thing as fast and as good as possible because he wanted to be able to use it. He wanted to use tech. So that's exactly how it happened. Marius got involved, and Judith, she's our current CTO, they got involved and they started to build. And they always teased me that they built a maximal viable product, not a minimal viable product, because what was launched in the middle of COVID lockdown on the 27th of April, 2020, was a product that was fully functional. It wasn't too buggy. I mean, yes, it had a few bugs, but it wasn't too buggy. And it was more than a beta release. It was really a good product. So we built in like record time, and we built something that was pretty good. Having said that, and here's the caveat, the underlying app architecture and things like documenting the code and all of that was very poor. So it was a little bit rickety. So that means when somebody else came in 3 months later and tried to fix it up, it was really, really problematic. So we had this beautiful, shiny kind of body on the outside of this car, but what was going on inside was a little bit rickety. That was the first issue. And the second issue was, and you always have regrets when you look back and you think, oh, I should have done that. Is that what I should have done in COVID is I should have released the app free of charge. And the reason I should have done that is, first of all, it would have been very sticky at a time when parents couldn't get to doctors, and here they could suddenly get information about the baby. But secondly, they would have been much more forgiving on the little bugs that were there. And so quite early on, we went onto the App Store, and there were a couple of like negative reviews. And I wish I'd gone, guys, this is a beta. You're getting it for free. Have fun and give me good feedback rather than reviewing it negatively. So, so I think it was as good as it could be, but there were definitely some learnings.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I guess that's that moving fast. The downside is that there's obviously going to be early issues and things like that. But brilliant. What is the dev house's name? Maybe let's give them a shout out as well. Are they still around?
I definitely would give them. I'd definitely give them a shout out. So they are around. Their name is Bitcube, and they're actually based in Bloemfontein. Amazing, amazing guys. I mean, really, I've remained friends with them, and they are incredible. If people are looking for dev house, they're incredible. We had quite an interesting journey with our dev houses, though, because quite early on, after about 6 months, they fired me. I didn't fire them; they fired me. And the reason they fired me, that I was a first-time tech founder, and I was not a technical expert. And so I would throw my toys out the cot and go and try and speak to developers. And of course, now, knowing what I know now, like that's just not the way to behave. But at the time, I wasn't used to this. So eventually they said to us, look, this is not the way that we work with our clients. You go and find yourself another dev house. And so after that, we had one dev house, which was a disaster, only lasted 3 months. I won't say their name, but it really wasn't great. And unfortunately, that does happen. And now we've got a full-time in-house, very robust dev team. And actually Judith, who coded the very first app, she was at Bitcube at the time, is now our full-time CTO. So she's been with us all the way along. So it is, I mean, choosing a dev house it's a thing, and it really is. It can be very hard, especially if you're a non-technical founder.
Well, it sounds like you got the right ones there in the beginning, and Amazing. Look, what 4 or 5 months, incredible. Without AI agents at that time, right? Nowadays, maybe that sounds possible, but definitely not then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
And it was interesting because, I mean, you learn as you go along. Like at the time we chose to build build native. We probably should have built hybrid in Flutter, but you didn't know these things at the time because there was a lot that the native languages could do that the hybrid languages couldn't do. So we're now actually rebuilding the whole product in a hybrid language in Flutter. So yeah, I mean, there's learnings as you go along.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the product and parenting is emotional and it's vulnerable. How do you think about building trust at scale through technology? Obviously, technology can be a bit cold. How do you build trust with parents?
Yeah, it's my daily challenge that I think about. I always talk to my team about being high tech, high touch, because high tech is amazing because it's super scalable, it's universal, it can, it's just amazing. And there's no ways that we can touch the scale of parents that we need to touch unless we have a digital product. So it is amazing. But there are a few things that have to be baked in to develop trust. The one is that you have to have human in the loop. Now, of course, that's become an AI term that everyone throws around and everybody understands it, but it's actually a really big thing. And it doesn't just go for AI, it goes for anything that's tech in my mind, where you've got somebody who is actually really sweating the soft stuff about it, which I do. I do QA on my app all the time. I'm constantly building new content. I'm making sure that our content is really up to date. So, I think having that human element comes through to parents. We're also we're de-risking our business off me so that it's not just me as the expert. We've got a number of other medical experts whose voices we bring out and who do my events with me and so on. And so that's really important, is to have a human touch. And then the other thing that personalizes it, and this is going to sound weird, but is actually data-driven advice. So, I think if you cast your mind back 15 years and you were on a website, as an example, before really we were using apps for parenting, I mean, maybe 20 years on websites, nothing was personalized. It was just very generic. It was like, one size fits all. And now you can really make information very, very nuanced, very specific to and personalized to parents and for their baby. And so we have a data-driven app. We use parents and babies' data, which is actually their data. It's fully private, fully in their space. They can delete it any time, but we use that data in order to actually give information about their baby. And I think that makes it feel personal.
And in terms of building, you're building in early childhood development. It obviously carries huge responsibility. How do you make hard decisions when what's best for the business and what's ideal clinically when those things don't perfectly align? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, one of the things that we did early on, we were a D2C product or B2C product where the consumer had to pay. And we very quickly realized, I mean, it took us 2.5 years to realize that the consumer wasn't going to pay for an app because we just don't. I mean, most of us have held a really useful app in our hands. We've maybe done a trial, we've probably not subscribed. And that's just our behavior. We expect digital products to be free. So early on, we had to find a way to monetize the product without the end user having to pay for it. And so we started to look at different different partners who have an aligned vision. So we divided our partnership landscape into four pieces. There was our mobile network operators, the likes of Vodacom and MTN. We had the employee benefit schemes, so people who are looking after their employees who are obviously becoming new parents. The brands, people like Clicks, Baby Club, who we do work with, and then the medical insurers like Discovery Health and Momentum Health and so on. And what we've learned as we've played with all of these partners, and we have partners in each of these different verticals, amazing businesses across South Africa and actually now globally, is that the best customers are the ones who are mission aligned. And that has become something that in the last 6 months, we're really doubling down on. So when you have somebody who's really focused on human health, on the development of babies and on maternal health, and you have the aligned vision to provide preventative health, that's where you actually kind of can really have impact. So, it means that you're not going to be taking people's data unnecessarily. You're not going to breach confidentiality. You're not going to make your end user pay, because everybody who's in your who's paying for this and who's your partner are mission aligned. So I think that's a big thing, is that we take it very seriously. Our data is incredibly private. We follow GDPR compliance, which is obviously the highest level in the world. Our chatbot is completely anonymized data. So we can't see any of the data that's coming in at all. It's anonymized. If we report on it, it's aggregated data. So we take it very seriously that A, we're careful with people's data. B, we have partners who are aligned with our mission as well. And we found them. And then I guess just the last thing that I do think about, and I don't have an answer for it yet, is that part of my theory about early childhood development is that parents need to be very in the moment, and they need to be very focused on their babies, and technology can interfere with that. And it's called technoference. So when you see parents who have got their heads buried in a phone and their baby's trying to make eye contact with them, that's technoference. It's a terribly destructive emotional space for a baby to be in. And yet I'm selling an app. And so I sit with this conundrum. I do think that utility apps, which this is a utility app, it's not a social media app, don't suck us in. We'll dip into it, we'll do something, we'll come out very quickly. Whereas your bigger risk sits in doom scrolling through social media, where you actually physically, or you're emotionally removed from your baby. But these are things I think about, because I do feel very strongly that we don't want too much technology, but at the same time, I am selling a tech product.
Brilliant. Sounds really also like you've had to pivot quite a lot, and you've been learning lots in the process. And building Parent Sense surely has stretched you, I'm sure. But what stretched you the most in terms of, leadership or fundraising, the hiring, the tech itself? Yeah. What has stretched you?
I mean, on a knowledge base, I guess what has stretched me is obviously understanding the tech and I understand things now that 5 years ago I had no idea what people would be talking about. But I wouldn't say that stretch was in any way stressful, because I have such a curious mind that I love to learn new things. So it wasn't a stretch for me. What was a stretch was probably 2 or 3 things. The one was the stuff I had to do with my left hand operationally, like running spreadsheets, doing budgets and reconciliations. We didn't have a CFO until this year. And I hate that, and preparing a board pack where I know I'm going to get grilled on my margins and I've got to be totally on top of that. So I haven't loved that. It stretched me, and I've met the demand, but it hasn't been what I loved. So I would say that definitely is something that I haven't loved. Fundraising has been an incredibly difficult journey for me. I raised my initial rounds, I bootstrapped initially. And it was, complete, and I can share a little bit about that journey, but the fundraising has definitely been something that's been hard, because it's not something that you do, that everybody gets out of bed knowing how to do. So that's been difficult. And then getting rid of staff that didn't have a good fit, which is actually very rare, because most of them will eventually just resign. But I really don't love that. That kind of interpersonal conflict is not great for me. And so I think those 3 things are probably the big ones.
Yeah, well, let's dig into the funding journey a little bit. You mentioned you initially strapped and then later raised a round of funding. Tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, so we bootstrapped the first year. We bonded our house, and we literally bonded the whole house and put it into the business in year 1. And then by the end of year 1, we thought we had projections that we thought people would be paying X for the app. We'd have X amount of customers, and therefore we'd be breaking even. And that obviously did not happen. And so at the end of year 1, in January 2021, I had to go out and find an investor. And I found my first angel investor, who invested over the course of 18 months in the business. And obviously at that point, I immediately started to dilute. And then I did, from 2021 to 2025, I did a series of small angel rounds, and they were all seed rounds. They were all angels. So I've got a lot of angels on my cap table. And those rounds, some of them were brutal, like, we are out of money next month. We are getting rid of our whole dev team. Somebody needs to assist. So, one of the angels would give me a CLN or convertible loan note. So there was a lot of that type of almost like it just wasn't carefully constructed and thought through. And, sometimes I look at it and I think this is not the way a clever founder does it. But the more I speak to founders, the more common it is that you're doing these little rounds while you're getting your product market fit. And then eventually get your product market fit, and then you actually can start to raise a proper round. So we raised our proper round in October last year, our first big round in October last year. And now, actually, I'm not sure if you saw, but we won the South African Future Trust Startup Award in November. And so that's another $1 million. Thank you. Yeah, so that's another $1 million. It's not a grant, it's an investment. So it's also an equity tranche. So we basically will have raised about 1.7 million pounds over the course of, from October till now. And that gives us a 2-year runway, and we are really proving things out now very fast. We're having a lot of customers sign on, like suddenly that flywheel's turning. So I'm hoping that we won't have a proper Series A actually ever. That's what I'm looking towards. But I mean, that fundraising journey's been tough, and I will tell you that I think that for any women founders who are listening, it is harder to raise funds as a woman, and it's an interesting psychology, because somebody once expressed it to me, and it really makes sense. Is that when you're a man, they will ask you, "What's your vision? What are you building?" And when you're a woman, they'll ask you how you're de-risking, how you're protecting, and it's very much if a man goes to a bank and asks for he says he wants a loan for property, they'll say, great, what's the upside? What's the area like? What's the return on investment going to be? And for the woman, it's going to be, do you know what the security is like in the area? Do you know, whether or not you can, whatever it is. And it's a subtle psychology that we have experienced as a woman. And the stats on women founders raising funds, as we know globally, are so diabolical that it is reflected in those numbers as well. And so it's been tough.
What advice would you give female founders, specifically on raising, and maybe also what advice would you give investors, being approached by female founders?
Yeah. So certainly one of the things that I would definitely say, and this actually goes for all founders, but definitely for female founders, is take nothing personally, and don't sit there and lick your wounds and think I'm a woman and this is not going to happen for me. Like, get up, get out there, sort it out. It's not personal. It's just the way it is, And I think having that attitude allows you to just get up every day and do it again, and to be a little bit tougher as well. And so I do think women need to just man up and get on with it, because otherwise, you're gonna bail, and you don't need to bail. You can stick with it, but it is kind of, I think sticking with it is important. For male investors, I think that I think that it's a serious question you need to ask yourself. You need to really think about, is this a question that I would honestly be asking a male founded or male-led business? Because I don't think everybody's always truthful with themselves about that. The other thing that I can tell you is that, and it's been an incredible experience to watch this and to learn this, is that a woman will generally give you a way more realistic vision of where her business is going. Men tend to be a lot more ballsy, and they'll go in and they'll say, we're going to 10x this in 7 months or whatever, and then all the investors go, right, divide that by 25%, and that's maybe what they're going to do. Well, a woman, actually, if she says she's going to 10x it in 7 months, she probably will, or she'll get close, because women tend to give you the worst picture. And a lot of our investors actually, in the end, would say that to us, is that we know that we don't have to adjust for your wild forecasts as much as we do with men. So, I think that is important for male investors to think about, and also to know. And the stats are there, is that women-founded business tend to give really good returns, actually, and be less risky. So, I mean, that's it's kind of a bit of an attitude adjustment, I guess, on both sides.
Wonderful. No, I really, really encourage any female founders listening. We need more of you. So please be encouraged. Don't stop. As Meg said, now, just keep going. Brilliant. What pulled you through though in those difficult times when you were raising funds, and like you mentioned, it was very close to you running out of funds? what pulls you through those very, very tough times?
Number one, you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. If you have purpose and mission, like it
Mm,
just every day I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't doubt it for a minute, and I really believe I can do it. So I think when things get really tough, having mission and purpose is very important. And actually, when you're leading a tech team, that's also important. One of the things that I try and transfer to my dev team is the reason that they are writing that line of code, because it can feel very, I would imagine, I'm not a developer, but I would imagine that it can feel quite clinical if you don't stop for a minute to think about actually the impact that you're having. And so I think being
mm,
impact driven and being mission driven is very, very important. The second thing is to have a team that you would die for. And I honestly would. My team are
mm,
they are extraordinary people. And it means that I can never let them down. Like even more than my investors and my customers, my team are the people
mm,
who, like, I have to raise tomorrow. I have to not take a salary. I have to do whatever it takes so that the team is protected. So we have cut everything when things have got really hard. We have cut everything, but we have tried not to cut the team because they're very, once you lose somebody, you lose their trust and they'll never come back. And I feel it's very important to, surround yourself with the right team.
mm,
And then I would say that there are two other things that that save businesses when they are facing no runway. And the one is having good and strong investors, because what's interesting about an investor is they start to take it personally. And so what's happened often, I mean, every time I've almost run out of runway, one of my investors has stepped up and gone, this is not happening. I've got one more person in my network that I can introduce you to. Or, and so your investor network becomes very, very powerful. And I have just the most
mm,
incredible investors on my cap table. So your investors see you through because they back you and they love your vision. They love what you're doing.
mm,
And then the last piece of advice, and maybe it's the most important, is that you have to have an aligned partnership in your home. So in my case, it's my husband. He has always built with me in the background. He maybe hasn't been operationally involved in the businesses, but he pretty much is involved in everything. And so when things, and I many times, Sam, I promise you, I have said to him, that's it. We are out of runway. I've got to tell the team tomorrow. And he said, it's not an option. You're getting up tomorrow. You're fine. We'll make a plan. And so, he's been my greatest champion. And I think that does keep you going as well. So, yeah, so
mm,
it's across team, investors, and your partner as well.
mm. Yeah, I love what you said about really getting back to your your reason why you're doing this,
Mm,
your
mm,
core vision and mission, something that,
mm.
repeated on this podcast a lot because it's just so
Yeah.
foundational, I think. Um, what change are you hoping to see in a generation of children because of your app and this platform that exists? And I think that takes us to the why.
Yeah, what a great question. Um, we are living in the most risky period that has ever existed in humanity for human engagement and human connection. Like it is, we have some very serious problems coming if we don't address them. And I
Mm,
think having parents who are reflective, who are focused on their children, who are thinking about how they parent their little ones, that is critically important. And it's part of what we do. We have a free webinar every single month that our moms can attend, any of our moms who have the app. And we always focused on that social emotional aspect. So I want to see more connected children. I want to see children who have incredible creative flair, because we also entering a time where education as we know it and jobs as we know it is going to be very different. I don't think we're going to lose jobs. Actually, I think it's just going to be totally different. And we
mm,
need to have people who are creative thinkers, people who are flexible, adjustable, and can move with the times. So I'm hoping
mm.
to see that as my big kind of hairy, audacious long-term goal. In the
Yeah.
day-to-day minutia, I'm just hoping to make life a little bit easier for mums and dads, because I don't think any parent realizes just how hard it's going to be before they fall pregnant. Like it's brutal. From the time you fall pregnant all the way through, you've got this incredible delight and this absolute magical time, but you don't know what you're doing. And that creates a lot of anxiety. And so if I can make parents' lives just a little bit easier in the day to day, then I've won. So for the babies, it's a more long-term vision. For the parents, it's a more in the moment, in the now. And that's what keeps me up at night.
Hmm. You mentioned the COVID period, that's the time when you started. I'm quite curious about that generation of young children that were kind of grew up in that COVID period. What impact do you think that's going to have on that particular generation of kids, and how can parents just be aware of that as well?
Yeah, you see, I think every generation, if you were in utero in COVID, if you were 2 years old in COVID, if you were 14 years old in COVID, if you were 19 years old in COVID, if you were a new parent in COVID, everybody has been impacted. There's absolutely no question. I worry about anxiety levels coming out of COVID. I think we lived with, and particularly for babies who were in utero at the time and newborn babies, there were very high levels of stress and cortisol and flight and fright that were going through all of our minds because we actually didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. So, and those pathways in the brain, particularly in the, if they're flowing through the placenta in pregnancy, or if they're reflected in the parent's eyes for a newborn baby, that codes and it changes the way that baby's brain is wired for life. So I do think we are seeing more heightened anxiety, and actually it goes through all the ages. I think the outcome of COVID, of being a very digitally driven society now, has had even more repercussions. So, it's kind of the hangover of COVID that's having more repercussions as well. And I really do worry about tech, even though I'm in tech. I think it's really interfering with anxiety levels and with connection and so on. So, I think those are the main things. I do think little ones, there's more social anxiety in these children because they just weren't exposed to social environments. So if you think about a 3-month-old baby, just as they're wiring what is me and what is other, so at that time they've been carried on their mom's hips through Pick and Pay or wherever they were, Checkers, wherever they are. They've been carried on their mom's hips or their dad's hips, and they're referencing their mom's face or their dad's face all the time as strangers walk up. And so mom smiles, and so they think, okay, this is safe. They never had that social referencing. It just didn't happen. So they have this chunk of time when they needed to work out social referencing, what's safe, what isn't, where they just didn't have that. So there definitely are repercussions on every generation of COVID.
Sure. Now, maybe just to close us off, when you look back at the moment you decided to build Parent Sense, what did you underestimate most about the journey?
Oh, everything. I definitely underestimated how much it would cost to build it. We over the years we've raised probably about £3 or £4 million. That's a lot of money. It's been big, and that's partly because it was a tech product, and technical skills are expensive, and you never build an app. I mean, this is one thing I want to say to people: you never build an app and it's finished, like, ever. So I think so it just keeps going. So I definitely underestimated that. I also underestimated how much I'd love it. I absolutely love what I do. I really do. Like, I go to bed at night, Sam, honestly, and I think, oh my gosh, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and there's going to be more. And so I really do love it, and I would miss it if I didn't have it. But I definitely, the cost, I think I just totally underestimated.
Amazing. I was going to ask, like, what any surprises in a good way as well. That sounds like, you surprised how much you love it. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the things that tech does, which of course very well, is that you can actually build anything. And I mean, I love it. Born to Build is the name of your podcast. You can, with tech, you can actually build everything. You can dream it, and it can be done. And often my COO I'm an optimist. You can probably hear from my voice, but she is a real. She's not a pessimist, but she's a realist. And she will say in a meeting, she'll say, I don't think that can be done. There is that never enters my mind. It can't be done, because with tech, you really can build it. And that's super exciting for me. Like, if you think it, you can build it. And I think in the next 18 months, we're about to see a complete disruption of the app world, and we're ready for it. We're building to be ready to have a totally different user interface, because our user interface in 18 months' time will simply not be what people use at the moment. And so we're building towards a new user interface, which is, I think, how people are going to use technology in the future. So that's exciting. Like, there's always something to solve.
Yeah. Sounds like you got a great team there then. You got the visionary, but you've also got a pragmatic person kind of making sure everything is operationally sound.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're a good mix. Yeah.
Well, to end us off, just a couple of rapid fire questions. You get to choose either or, routine or go with the flow.
Routine.
Beach holiday or bush escape?
A bush escape.
Where's your favorite bush escape?
Oh my goodness. Anywhere in the Lowveld. We used to go to the Lowveld every year, and we've just been there now, and oh my goodness, just anywhere in the Lowveld. That the noise in the evening, and I often think that it's the perfect antidote for our technical world, because everything, visual, sound, smells, it's an antidote.
Lovely. Early bird or night owl?
5 a.m. consistently every day.
Same. Podcast or paperback?
Woo, now you're asking me. I'm going to go podcast.
Nice. Right answer. No, kidding. I love books as well. But yeah, podcast. Meg, so great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining. Super insightful, some great nuggets, and so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Cheers.